What if the moment you think you missed is the lie that's been keeping you small? What if too late is just a memory your mind learned to worship? There's a quiet grief that doesn't announce itself. It shows up when the world slows down, when you remember who you almost became. You replay timelines like crime scenes, searching for the second everything went wrong. Somewhere along the way, time turned into a verdict, and you accepted it without appeal. But notice this: the ache isn't about what you lost. It's about what still refuses to die inside you. The desire, the vision, the pull you can't explain. You were taught that opportunity obeys clocks, that life moves once and never circles back. Yet something deeper has been watching, waiting, unexpired. If the infinite was never keeping score, then who convinced you the door closed? And why does it still feel like it's breathing? You don't actually believe it's too late. Not in the clean, logical way you'd say it out loud. Not in the way you'd explain it to a friend, with reasonable words and a resigned shrug. You believe it in your body, in the way your chest tightens when you see someone your age doing the thing you once swore you would do, in the way your throat goes dry when you open an old folder of unfinished plans, half-written dreams, and photos from a version of you who still had permission to want. In the unbelievable way your mind can turn one missed moment into a permanent sentence. And it's shocking, because if you're honest, you didn't just move on. You buried something alive. You trained yourself to call the burial maturity. You called the grief being realistic. You called the shadow wisdom. You called the regret closure. But none of it closed. It just got quieter. There's a mystery to this kind of pain. It doesn't scream. It waits. It shows up when the house is finally silent, when the world stops demanding your performance, when you're alone with the truth you keep postponing. You didn't stop wanting it. You stopped believing you were allowed to have it now. So you did what people do when they can't bear that kind of desperate truth. You turned time into a judge. You let years become a courtroom, and you walked in already guilty. You started collecting evidence against yourself like it was a sacred duty. Look how long it's been. Look how old I am. Look at what I wasted. Look at what I chose. Look at what I didn't choose. And the verdict felt so certain, so heavy, so final, that you forgot the most unbelievable part. Time never spoke. You did. You were the one who took a calendar and gave it the authority of God. And the moment you did that, you didn't just fear delay, you became delay. That's the hidden problem. Not the lost years, not the missed opportunity, not the people who didn't support you, not the economy, not the timing, not the chaos of life. The hidden problem is that you internalized not yet until it became not me. You took an external sequence, events, ages, dates, and turned it into identity. You didn't say, I made choices. You said, I am my choices. You didn't say, I delayed. You said, I am the kind of person who delays. You didn't say, I was hurt. You said, I am someone who gets hurt and stays there. And once that happens, the past is no longer memory. It becomes a religion. You worship what happened, not because you enjoy it. No, it's darker than that. You worship it because it explains your hesitation, because it justifies your fear, because it protects you from the desperation of hoping again, because hope is dangerous when you've tasted regret. Hope is terrifying when you remember the last time you believed and it didn't turn out the way you begged it to. Hope is a door you don't want to open because you're afraid the room will be empty. So instead, you clutch time like a weapon and say, I'm being realistic. But realism can be a mask, and sometimes the mask is the shadow. Here's the shocking truth hiding under that mask. If you truly believed it was impossible, you wouldn't feel so haunted. You wouldn't feel the strange pull. You wouldn't feel the quiet ache. You wouldn't flinch at the words right now. You wouldn't feel that internal contradiction, wanting to move forward while your soul keeps looking back like someone is calling your name from a burning house. That contradiction is not a flaw. It's a revelation, because it shows you the real war isn't between you and the world. It's between you and the identity you built out of delay. Think about what you've been doing without realizing it. Every time you reach for something meaningful, a voice rises up, soft, familiar, almost loving in its cruelty, and it says, "Who do you think you are?" Not because you aren't capable, but because you're late. As if late is a character trait, as if late is a moral failure, as if late is something you are instead of a story you learned. And where did you learn it? You learned it in small humiliations you never processed. In moments when you were excited and someone's indifference made you feel foolish. In the time you tried and failed and decided the failure was a prophecy. In the time you waited for permission and it never came. So you told yourself the silence meant no. You learned it from a culture that treats age like expiration, from conversations that make your timeline sound like a countdown, from the way people talk about wasting time, like time is a debt collector. And the most unbelievable part? You didn't just learn it. You started enforcing it. You became the guard at your own gate. You started scanning your own desire like it was contraband. Is this realistic? Is it too late? Didn't I miss my chance? You interrogated your longing until it confessed to being meaningless, and then you called that wisdom. But it wasn't wisdom. It was self-sabotage dressed as logic. It was fear using time as an excuse. Because time is the perfect excuse. It's untouchable. It's universal. It doesn't argue back, it doesn't defend you, it doesn't comfort you, it just sits there like a silent witness while you tell yourself a story so often it hardens into truth. Until one day, you don't even notice you're living inside a sentence you wrote. You don't notice that the real prison isn't the past. It's the interpretation. It's the meaning you assigned to it. And the meaning you assigned, this is where the wound opens, was never neutral. It was always personal. It was always about you being the problem, not your environment, not your support system, not the timing, not the information you didn't have back then, not the fact that you were doing the best you could with the consciousness you had. No, you made it a character indictment. I'm the kind of person who misses things, and once you accept that as truth, everything becomes evidence. A single delay becomes a lifetime pattern. A single detour becomes a destiny. A single mistake becomes an identity. That's the hidden contradiction. You say you want renewal, but you keep renewing the verdict. Every day you reenact the trial. Every day you bring the same old memories to the stand and ask them to testify against your future. Every day you let the shadow of what happened speak louder than the living truth of what is possible. And then you wonder why you feel so tired. Not physical tired, soul tired. The kind of tired that doesn't go away with sleep. The kind of tired that comes from carrying an invisible weight. The weight of being perpetually behind. Behind who? Behind what? Behind a timeline that was never promised. Behind an imaginary version of yourself you think you should have become by now. And that's where the grief gets quiet and sharp like a blade wrapped in cloth, because you don't just regret what happened. You regret who you could have been if you hadn't believed time was a judge. You regret the version of you who would have tried again. You regret the version of you who would have started anyway. You regret the version of you who would have dared to be a beginner at an age your ego insists you should already be an expert. And the desperation comes from the strangest place, is not from the fear that you can't do it, but from the fear that you can, and that means you'll have no excuse left to hide. That's why too late feels safe. Because too late is a coffin you can rest in. A coffin is horrible, yes, but it's certain, and certainty, even painful certainty, is addictive. It keeps you from the terrifying mystery of the unknown. It keeps you from the revelation that your life could change. Because if your life could change, then the shadow can't be blamed anymore. Then the truth would point back to you, not as guilty, as powerful. And that possibility is the thing you've been avoiding. Look closely at the language you use in your mind. It's not just I should have, it's I ruined it. It's not just I waited, it's I wasted my life. It's not just I didn't know then, it's I should have known. Do you feel the violence in that? The shocking way you punish yourself for being human? The unbelievable expectation that you were supposed to be omniscient at 20, fearless at 30, perfectly aligned at 40, spiritually evolved at all times, never confused, never wounded, never lost. And when you inevitably weren't, you sentenced yourself. That sentence is what's keeping you small. Because here's the hidden mechanism of the wound. Still no solution, just the raw truth. When you turn the past into identity, you stop experiencing the present as alive. You experience it as a delayed continuation of your failure, So even when an opportunity appears, you can't receive it cleanly. You don't meet it with openness, you meet it with suspicion. You look for the catch. You look for how it will hurt. You look for the moment it will confirm your regret. And if you can't find the catch, you create one. You procrastinate. You hesitate. You research until passion dies. You wait for a perfect sign. You wait for confidence. You wait for the fear to leave. You wait for the right time. The right time. As if time is a door that opens only for the worthy, so you can stay innocent, so you can avoid the vulnerability of trying and failing again. Because trying again is not just action, it's exposure. It's the willingness to stand in front of your own dream and admit, I still want you. And that is unbearable for the part of you that has been trained to equate wanting with humiliation. So you soften the wanting, you dilute it, you call it a nice idea. You tell yourself you're fine, you tell yourself you've moved on. But then it hits you, randomly, cruelly. A song, a scent, a face, a place. And suddenly you're back in the shadow, staring at the life you didn't live, feeling that strange desperation, not because you're broken, but because something in you refuses to die. That refusal is what scares you, because it makes your story unstable. If the desire is still here, then the door might not be closed. If the door might not be closed, then too late might be a lie. And if too late is a lie, then what else have you believed? That's where the betrayal of your own assumptions begins, quietly, invisibly, like a crack in a wall you've leaned on for years. You start noticing how often you use time to dismiss yourself. I'm too old to start. I should have done it earlier. They're ahead of me. It would take too long. And every one of those statements sounds like logic. But listen to the emotional engine underneath them. It's not logic. It's fear of shame. Because starting now means admitting you could have started before. Starting now means confronting regret without the anesthetic of delay. Starting now means you can no longer pretend the problem is time. The problem becomes choice. And choice is terrifying when you've been living under a verdict. So you keep time as the villain. You keep the calendar as the judge. You keep the past as the prosecutor. Because as long as you do that, you can remain the victim of something abstract instead of the author of something new. And the most unbelievable part is how noble it looks from the outside. People applaud resignation. They call it acceptance. They call it being realistic. They call it letting go. They tell you you're strong for moving on. But you know the truth. You didn't let go. You went numb. There's a difference. Letting go has peace in it. Numbness has emptiness. And emptiness has an echo. That echo is what you hear at night. It's the sound of your own unlived life knocking softly from the inside. Not demanding, not accusing, just existing. Like a heartbeat you tried to forget. So the hidden problem is not that time passed. The hidden problem is that you agreed with a lie about what time means. You agreed that past decisions are permanent identity. You agreed that delay equals disqualification. You agreed that a missed moment is a missed life. And every time you agreed, you strengthened the shadow. You fed it. You let it grow teeth. You let it take the shape of truth until it started speaking in your voice. That's the part that hurts the most. The enemy doesn't sound like an enemy. It sounds like you. It uses your tone, your memories, your intimate knowledge of your soft spots. It says, be careful. It says, don't embarrass yourself. It says, you've already tried. It says, people will judge you. It says, the world has moved on. And then, with a final calm cruelty, it says the sentence that ends your motion, it's too late. And the moment you accept that sentence, you feel a strange relief. A dark relief. Because you don't have to risk anything anymore. No rejection, no failure, no disappointment. Just the slow ache of regret and the numb safety of never trying again. But here is the revelation hiding inside that relief. If too late can calm you, then too late is not a fact. It's a spell. And spells can be broken. Not yet. No resolution here, no steps, no comfort, no neat ending. Just this unsettling truth, hanging in the air like smoke. What if the reason you feel stuck isn't because your chance is gone, but because you keep repeating the verdict that makes it feel gone? And if that verdict was never spoken by life, If it was never spoken by the infinite, if it was only spoken by the frightened part of you trying to avoid humiliation, then the most shocking question becomes unavoidable, and it doesn't let you breathe. If time was never your judge, why do you still feel guilty? And what happens when the guilt finally turns around and looks you in the eyes? There is a moment, quiet, unsettling, almost unbelievable, when you begin to sense that something you trusted has betrayed you. Not a person, an idea. The idea that time moves forward like a judge with a ledger. The idea that life hands out chances once, stamps them with dates, and then locks them away forever. The idea that renewal is rare, conditional, and reserved for the lucky or the early. That idea has been standing in your mind for so long you stopped questioning it. But now, something trembles. Because beneath the regret, beneath the desperation, beneath the shadow that has followed you for years, a deeper truth starts to surface. And it doesn't feel polite. It doesn't feel comforting. It feels like a revelation that rearranges the furniture of your inner world without asking permission. What if time is not what you think it is? What if time is not an authority but a mirror? This is where the betrayal of old beliefs begins, because if time were truly the ruler you were taught it was, desire would fade as years pass, longing would weaken, vision would dissolve, the fire would die naturally like a candle running out of wax. But that's not what happened to you. The desire didn't expire, it waited. It stayed dormant, not dead. It hid under layers of logic and resignation, not because it was weak, but because you weren't ready to face what it meant. That alone should disturb you, because it suggests something shocking. Desire does not obey clocks, it obeys consciousness. And if that's true, if desire persists not because of nostalgia but because of alignment, then it is not a cruel reminder of what you lost. It is a signal, a living signal. This is the invisible law no one taught you, because it dismantles the entire narrative of delay and disqualification. Life does not renew through time, it renews through awareness. Time does not create, consciousness does. And time only reflects what consciousness is doing. That's why two people can live the same number of years and inhabit completely different realities. That's why one person feels ancient at 30 and another feels reborn at 60. That's why moments can feel endless or fleeting depending on where your attention is anchored. Time does not move you. You move within it. And here's where the unsettling realization deepens. When you believed you were too late, time seemed heavy, oppressive, condemning. Every year felt like proof. Every birthday felt like an accusation. Every passing season felt like a door slamming shut. But that heaviness did not come from time itself. It came from your interpretation, from the meaning you projected onto it. Time mirrored your belief. That's the law. Time mirrors belief. Time reflects identity. Time echoes consciousness. Which means, stay with this, even if it makes your breath catch. The stagnation you feel is not punishment. It's feedback. A mirror showing you what you've been holding as truth. And the truth you've been holding is this: I am late. So life, obedient and neutral, reflects lateness, not to mock you, not to trap you, but to show you what you're assuming about yourself. This is where awe mixes with discomfort, because it means the universe was never withholding renewal. You were withholding permission. You were waiting for time to change so you could feel allowed. But time has no power to grant permission. Only consciousness does. And consciousness has been quietly waiting for you to notice that the desire never left, that the pull never weakened, that the vision never stopped whispering. Why? Because desire is not a fantasy. It's an echo of alignment. It's the vibration of something that exists for you now, not later, not then, not in some erased past. If it were truly over, the signal would stop, the mystery would dissolve, the ache would fade. But it didn't. Which means something is still active, still alive, still unfinished. And this is where the betrayal cuts deepest, because it exposes a lie you built your safety around. You believed desire was cruel because it reminded you of what you lost. But what if desire is loyal? What if it stayed because you stayed relevant to it? What if the very fact that it returns again and again in dreams, in quiet moments, in sudden pangs of regret, is proof that the law of renewal has never stopped operating? The law doesn't care about age. It doesn't care about chronology. It doesn't care about how long you've waited. It responds only to awareness, to where you place your attention, to what you claim as real. And when you placed your attention on the past, the law reflected the past. When you placed your attention on regret, the law reflected regret. When you placed your attention on too late, the law reflected limitation. Not because it agrees with you morally, but because it agrees with you mechanically. This is not a moral universe, it's a responsive one. That's why this realization doesn't feel comforting. It feels destabilizing, because it removes the villain. It removes time as the enemy. It removes fate as the executioner. And suddenly, you're left standing in front of a mirror that doesn't accuse, but doesn't lie either. The mirror says, "What you assume, I become. What you hold, I echo. What you identify as, I reinforce." And in that reflection, you begin to sense something dangerous and sacred at the same time. Renewal is not something that happens after enough time passes. Renewal happens the moment identity shifts. But that realization does not resolve you. It unsettles you. Because if renewal is always available, then the reason you haven't experienced it yet cannot be blamed on delay. It must be something closer, something more intimate, something that involves letting go of the identity built out of regret. And that feels like stepping into darkness without a map. Because the identity of late has been protecting you from risk, from exposure, from disappointment, from standing naked in front of your own possibility. So the law reveals itself not as comfort, but as pressure. A pressure that asks a terrifying question without answering it. If consciousness is the source, if time is only the mirror, if desire is the signal, then what happens when you stop identifying with the past? What happens to the world you know? What happens to the story that has kept you safe? What happens to the shadow when you stop feeding it belief? No answers yet, no peace, just the hum of something ancient and alive stirring beneath your assumptions. Just the sense that the law has always been operating, and that now finally it has your attention. And once the law has your attention, it doesn't let go easily. There is a strange kind of fear that arrives, not when you realize something is wrong, but when you realize something has been working exactly as designed. Because if the law you've been living under was never broken, if it was never cruel, if it was never unfair, then the discomfort you feel right now is not grief, it's recognition. The kind that makes your stomach tighten. The kind that pulls the ground out from under excuses you've leaned on for years. Because this invisible law does not punish, it reflects. And reflection is ruthless in its honesty. You were never abandoned by life. You were mirrored. Your belief that you were behind became the tempo of your experience. Your identity as someone who missed it became the frequency your world responded to. And slowly, quietly, without drama, reality organized itself around that assumption. Not as fate, as feedback. This is the part where awe and betrayal collide, because it means the universe did not steal your chance. You handed over your present moment to a memory, and the law, obedient and neutral, followed your lead. You see now how subtle it was, how the shift didn't happen in one catastrophic decision, but in 1,000 small agreements. Each time you said, "It's not the right time," without listening to the deeper impulse. Each time you delayed action until confidence arrived. Each time you treated hesitation as wisdom. Each time you confused fear with intuition. Each time you waited for the feeling of readiness instead of recognizing readiness as something that emerges after movement. And the law reflected that waiting, not as punishment, as precision. Because the law does not respond to what you want. It responds to what you are, to the state you occupy, to the identity you repeat internally, often without words. This is why affirmations failed you. This is why positive thinking felt hollow. This is why repeating, "It's not too late" in your head never changed anything. Because somewhere deeper in the place you don't narrate, you were still holding the image of yourself as late, still flinching at the present, still standing one step behind your own life. The law doesn't listen to surface language. It listens to embodiment, to what you assume when no one is watching, to the way you stand in the world when you're alone with your thoughts. And that's why this realization is not comforting. It strips away the fantasy that time will fix things for you. It reveals that time has been waiting for you, waiting for a shift so subtle it feels like nothing, and yet so profound it changes everything. A shift in where you place your awareness, a shift in what you consent to identify as. Because here is the most unsettling truth of all. The present moment is the only creative point. Not tomorrow, not someday, not after healing, not after clarity. Now. And you've been avoiding now because now does not come with guarantees. Now does not come with protection. Now does not explain itself. Now simply asks, who are you being? This is why the present feels charged when you stop running from it. It feels heavy, dense, almost electric, because it is the only place where renewal can occur. And renewal, true renewal, is not gentle. It requires the death of an old identity, the identity of waiting, the identity of being late, the identity of being shaped by what already happened. That identity resists. It whispers panic. It says, if I let go of the past, I lose the story that explains my pain. It says, if I step into now, I might fail without excuses. It says, if I stop identifying as late, I will have to find out who I really am. And that is terrifying, because who you really are has not been rehearsed. There is no script, no memory to lean on, no precedent, just presence, just attention, just the raw sensation of being alive without a verdict attached. This is where the law becomes almost unbearable to look at, because it doesn't demand effort. It demands surrender. Not surrender to fate, but surrender of the old agreement with time. The agreement that said, I am defined by what has passed. And the moment you even glimpse the possibility that this agreement is optional, something shifts, not externally, internally, like a pressure change, like the silence before a storm. You feel exposed, unprotected, strangely awake, because if you withdraw belief from the past loses its authority. And if the past loses its authority, then the present becomes unbearably alive, full of potential, full of risk, full of responsibility. This is why most people turn back at this point. They feel the edge of renewal and retreat. They prefer the familiar ache of regret to the unknown intensity of now, because regret hurts. But it doesn't demand action. The present does. And so the law waits. Patient, impersonal, exact. Waiting for the moment you stop asking time for permission and place your awareness here. Not later, not soon, here. But we are not resolving this. Not yet. No techniques, no instructions, no comfort, just this charged realization hanging in the air between breaths. If the law responds to identity, if identity is anchored in awareness, and awareness is always now, then the door you thought was closed might not be behind you. It might be right where you're standing, and the only thing that has been keeping it shut is the belief that you are not allowed to open it. What happens when that belief starts to loosen? Not answers, just tension, just presence, just the sense that something irreversible has already begun. If this is landing somewhere deep inside you, not in your thoughts but in your chest, not as an idea but as a disturbance, then pause. Don't rush past this moment, because what you're feeling right now is not entertainment, it's recognition. A quiet, unsettling recognition that something you thought was finished is still alive, that something you buried under years, logic and delay just moved, that the shadow you've been living with isn't an enemy. It's a signal that you're standing at the edge of a revelation. And edges matter. They are thresholds. This is where most people disappear. They feel the charge and scroll away. They feel the tension and numb it. They feel the truth and postpone it. Because staying here means admitting something without saying it out loud. This applies to me, and that admission is an act of power. So if this is hitting you, if you feel that strange mix of shock and familiarity, if your breath feels different, if your body is listening even while your mind is trying to stay guarded, then do not treat this moment as passive. Make it visible. Like this video, not as a favor but as a declaration, a small deliberate act that says, I felt this, I didn't look away. Comment, not with something clever, not with an explanation, but with whatever word, phrase, or truth just woke up inside you. Even if it feels unfinished, especially if it feels unfinished, put language to the frequency moving through you and subscribe, not to a channel, but to a state, to staying inside this field of awareness, to not abandoning the moment the tension rises, to not retreating when the old identity feels threatened, because this isn't about algorithms, it's about alignment. Engagement is not a button here, it's a signal to yourself that you are no longer pretending this doesn't matter, that you are willing, even just a little, to be seen by your own truth. Say it out loud if you can. Type it if you can't. Make it real, because when you externalize an internal recognition, something subtle locks in place. The law responds, not dramatically, not immediately, but precisely. This is how movement begins, not with grand gestures, but with small acts of honesty that collapse denial. And if you feel resistance right now, good. That resistance is the old identity tightening its grip. Let it feel threatened. You are not resolving anything yet, you are simply choosing not to disappear. You are staying present. And presence is where renewal waits. Just beyond the next breath, just beyond the next moment of courage, just beyond the place where you usually turn back. There is no dramatic technique waiting for you here, no ritual to memorize, no list of steps to follow, no performance to perfect, because what is required now is not addition, it is withdrawal. A quiet, deliberate withdrawal of belief. Belief from the past, belief from the story, belief from the identity that has been feeding on memory like it was oxygen. This is where the shift begins, not as action, but as an inner reallocation of power. You have been investing awareness backward, pouring attention into what happened, what didn't happen, what should have happened, what could have happened, revisiting scenes like crime footage, hoping one more replay will finally deliver absolution. But the past cannot create, it can only repeat. And the longer you keep awareness anchored there, the more the law mirrors stagnation. So the movement toward renewal does not start with doing. It starts with noticing. Noticing how often your mind leaves the present to consult a memory before it allows you to feel alive. Noticing how quickly you reference who you used to be before you let yourself imagine who you might be now. Noticing how the past has become a filter you don't even realize you're looking through. This noticing is not gentle. It brings discomfort, because the moment you catch yourself withdrawing from now, you feel exposed. You feel like you're standing without armor. You feel the desperation you've been medicating with delay. And here is the suppressed hope hidden inside that discomfort. The present moment does not require your history. It does not ask for credentials. It does not care how long you've waited. The present moment only responds to awareness. When awareness returns here, even briefly, the body responds first. Breath deepens without instruction. The nervous system shifts. The static hum of regret softens just enough for something else to be felt. Not joy, not certainty, possibility, fragile, unstable, alive. And this is where most people sabotage the shift. They demand clarity. They want assurance that the risk will be worth it. They want proof that renewal is guaranteed. But proof only comes after embodiment, never before. So the shift is this, and it is almost offensively simple. You stop using the past to decide how present you're allowed to be. That's it. No affirmations, no rewriting history, no pretending the pain didn't happen, just a refusal to let memory dictate aliveness. You don't fight the past. You don't heal it. You stop consulting it. And the moment you do, even for a second, you feel the old identity panic. Because the identity built on delay loses oxygen when attention leaves memory. It tries to pull you back. It whispers urgency. It manufactures doubt. It reminds you of everything that could go wrong. It tells you you're being irresponsible. It tells you you're ignoring reality. But what it's really saying is this: if you stay here, I disappear. And that's the tension you must learn to tolerate. Not action, not confidence. Tension. The tension of being present without explanation. The tension of existing without a verdict. The tension of feeling the now without knowing what it will become. This is not comfort. This is discipline, a spiritual discipline, not of force, but of attention. And when attention stabilizes here even slightly, something shocking begins to happen. Time feels different, not faster, not slower, less oppressive, less accusatory. Because when awareness is fully present, time has nothing to reflect except aliveness. And aliveness is renewal in its earliest form. But this is not resolution, this is the edge, because staying present feels dangerous to the part of you that survived by waiting. And that part is not ready to surrender quietly. It will test you. It will provoke you. It will tempt you to retreat back into memory where things feel familiar, even if they hurt. So the shift demands something rare, the willingness to remain here, breathing, sensing, aware, without turning this moment into a means to an end, without using now to bargain for a future, without asking for permission, just staying, and staying long enough for the present to reveal its true weight, because the present is not empty. It is dense with creation, and the longer you avoid it, the longer renewal waits without complaint. But the moment you return, not perfectly, not forever. Just now, the law responds, quietly, invisibly, unmistakably. And that response has consequences you are not yet ready to name. Staying here does not feel heroic, it feels awkward, like standing in a room where the furniture has been removed and there is nowhere to hide your hands. Like breathing without a story to accompany the inhale, like being awake without the familiar anesthesia of memory. This is why the shift feels threatening, because the past gave you context. The present gives you nothing but sensation, and sensation is honest. When you stop reinvesting belief in what already happened, you begin to feel how much energy was locked inside resistance, how much of your life force was being used to keep the verdict intact, how much tension was required to keep saying silently, "I am late." That tension starts to release, not into comfort, but into intensity, the intensity of being here, of noticing the weight of your body, the rhythm of breath, the subtle impulse to move, to speak, to act, impulses you've been muting because they didn't fit the timeline you thought you missed. And with that intensity comes fear, not fear of failure, fear of irrelevance, because if the present moment is enough, then the past loses its power to define you. And if the past loses its power, then who are you? This question does not come with an answer. It comes with a sensation of groundlessness, of standing on something that does not explain itself. And this is where suppressed hope flickers, not the loud motivational kind, the quiet kind that scares you because it feels real. Hope without fantasy, hope without guarantee. Hope that exists not as a promise, but as a pulse. You begin to sense without words that aliveness is not waiting for conditions. It is responding to attention. That when you are fully here, even for a breath, the inner atmosphere changes. Thoughts slow. The future loosens. The past dims. And for a moment, the identity of late cannot survive because there is no time inside presence. There is only now, and now does not carry a verdict. Now does not accuse. Now does not ask for justification. Now simply is. This is why the method cannot be turned into a checklist, because the moment you try to use presence to get something, you leave it. The moment you turn awareness into a strategy, you re-enter time. So the shift is fragile. It requires honesty. The honesty to admit when you've slipped back into memory, the honesty to notice when you're rehearsing explanations instead of feeling your breath, the honesty to feel the discomfort of not knowing what comes next. This is not self-improvement. This is self-withdrawal from the identity that has been living in delay. And the deeper you stay here, the more you sense something unsettling. The urgency you felt before was never about time running out. It was about life wanting your attention. It was about aliveness pressing against the walls of an identity that had grown too small. That pressure wasn't a threat, it was a summons. And now that you're listening, even a little, the summons does not stop. It doesn't shout. It hums. A low, steady frequency beneath your thoughts. And that hum does not tell you what to do. It tells you who you are when you stop waiting. Not resolved, not complete, but present. And presence is where creation begins to stir. Not visibly, not dramatically, internally, like a current you can't yet see but can feel moving through you. This is why the shift feels incomplete, because it is. It is not a conclusion. It is an opening. An opening that asks something uncomfortable of you. Can you remain here without turning away? Can you tolerate the silence without filling it with regret? Can you let the present be enough, even before it becomes anything else? Most people can't. They rush ahead, they demand results. They abandon the shift the moment it doesn't soothe them. But if you stay just long enough to feel the unfamiliar weight of now, you realize something that doesn't bring peace, but brings truth. The door you thought you missed was never in the past. It has always been here. And the only reason you didn't see it is because you were looking backward, not closure, not comfort. Just this suspended recognition vibrating in your chest. If you stop waiting, what might start moving? And are you willing to find out? Something begins to fracture quietly when you stay with that question. Not your life, not your circumstances, your self-image. The image you have been carrying, heavy, inherited, unquestioned, starts to feel inaccurate. Like wearing a coat that once fit, but now restricts your breath. Like answering to a name that no longer belongs to you. And the fracture is not dramatic. It is subtle. You notice it in the way the word late suddenly feels foreign in your mouth. In the way the old accusations lose their sharpness, not because they were disproven, but because they no longer feel relevant. In the way the shadow that once defined you starts to thin, not disappear, just loosen. This is where identity begins to reconfigure, not through declaration, through dissonance. You can no longer fully believe the story that said you were behind. And that disbelief is destabilizing, because that story gave you structure. It explained your hesitation. It justified your fear. It gave you a place to stand, even if that place was pain. Without it, you feel exposed, undefined, and yet strangely lighter. This is the moment where power starts to flicker, not as confidence but as presence, not as certainty but as inner heat, a low-burning fire that does not announce itself but refuses to go out. You begin to sense that you are not someone waiting for renewal. You are someone through whom renewal moves. This is not a belief you adopt. It's a recognition that startles you. Because if renewal is a living frequency, if it responds to awareness, then you are not a passive recipient. You are a channel. And channels are not late. They are open or closed. That realization hits like a quiet shock. You were never behind life. You were standing slightly turned away from it. And now, without fanfare, without applause, you are turning back. The identity that forms here is not heroic. It is grounded. You do not feel chosen. You feel available. Available to act without waiting for certainty. Available to feel without interpreting. Available to move without asking the past for permission. This availability is dangerous to the old self, because the old self survived by waiting, by delaying, by staying just outside the moment where risk begins. But the emerging identity does not negotiate with delay. It does not rush either. It simply does not pause to ask, "Am I allowed?" And that changes everything. You start to recognize the old internal dialogue for what it is, not truth, but habit. A reflex born from protection, not wisdom. A voice that once kept you safe but now keeps you small. And instead of fighting it, you let it speak without obeying it. That alone is revolutionary. Because obedience was never required, only belief was. And belief is shifting. You feel it in your spine, in the way you stand a little differently, in the way your breath settles lower in your body, in the way the future no longer feels like a wall, but like a fog you can walk into without knowing what's on the other side. This identity does not say I am healed. It says I am here. It does not say I am ready. It says I am willing, and willingness has weight. It bends reality, because willingness is presence in motion. And presence in motion is how renewal expresses itself through form. Still, there is tension, because this identity has no proof yet, no results, no evidence, just an inner knowing that feels both empowering and dangerous. If I am not late, then I am responsible. Responsible not in the moral sense, but in the creative one. Responsible for where I place my awareness. Responsible for whether I stay present or retreat. Responsible for whether I live as a memory or as a moment. That responsibility does not feel like freedom yet. It feels like fire, and fire does not comfort. It transforms, but transformation has not arrived. Only the heat, only the pressure, only the sense that the version of you who survived by waiting is slowly being outgrown. And that growth does not ask for permission. It continues, whether you are ready or not. There is a grief that accompanies this reconfiguration, not the old grief of regret, but the grief of release. Because as the identity of late loosens its grip, you begin to feel what it cost you to carry it for so long. How much energy you spent defending it. How often you betrayed your own impulse to remain loyal to a story that kept you safe but small. And that realization hurts. It hurts because you see that the shadow was never imposed, it was maintained. Maintained by fear, maintained by habit, maintained by the desperate need to explain why you didn't move. But alongside that grief, something else ignites. A strange, steady resolve, not ambition, not urgency, resolve. The kind that does not announce itself, the kind that does not need validation. You begin to feel the difference between waiting and listening. Waiting is passive, anxious, tense. Listening is alert, embodied, calm. And you are no longer waiting, you are listening. Listening for the subtle impulse that arises not from fear, but from presence. The impulse that doesn't shout, but persists. The one you used to ignore because it didn't fit the narrative of delay. That impulse is not impatient. It does not rush you. It simply does not retreat. And as you listen to it, you start to act differently. Not in big, visible ways, but in small, internal ones. You stop apologizing in advance. You stop rehearsing explanations. You stop disqualifying yourself before the world gets a chance. You are still afraid, but fear is no longer the authority. It is a sensation that moves through you without deciding for you. That alone marks a rupture in identity, because the old you believed fear was a stop sign. The emerging you understands fear as weather, temporary, informational, not a verdict. And so you become someone who moves with fear instead of obeying it. Someone who does not wait for confidence to appear before stepping forward. Someone who understands that confidence is not a prerequisite, it is a byproduct. This is not bravado. This is quiet power. Power that comes from no longer arguing with time, no longer negotiating with the past, no longer measuring yourself against an imaginary schedule. You begin to sense that identity is not something you declare. It is something you inhabit, and the space you are inhabiting now is different, less cramped, less heavy, still uncertain, but alive. You feel it when you wake up, not as excitement, as alertness. A subtle readiness to meet the day without already knowing how it will judge you. Because judgment has lost its grip. There is no longer a court inside your mind, constantly weighing your worth against your age, your history, your missed moments. That court has adjourned. Not because you won the case, but because the case no longer matters. And that leaves you standing in a strange openness. No verdict, no sentence, no excuse. Just presence. Just choice. Just the ongoing responsibility of where you place your attention. This is who you are becoming. Not someone who has it figured out. Not someone who is finally on time. But someone who is in time. Inside the moment. Inside the pulse. Inside the current of renewal that does not ask when you arrived, only whether you are here. Still, there is no resolution, because identity is not fixed, it is lived, and the identity of presence must be chosen again and again, moment by moment, breath by breath. And there will be moments, many of them, when the old story tries to return, when regret knocks, when delay whispers, when the shadow reaches for you with familiar hands, and you will feel the pull. That pull does not mean you are failing. It means the transition is real, because nothing that changes easily was ever deep. So you stand here now, not finished, not transformed, not complete, but reoriented, facing forward, breathing, listening, aware. And that awareness hums with a question that does not demand an answer, only presence. If you are no longer late, who are you willing to become next? And will you stay long enough to find out? There is a silence now. Not the empty silence you used to fear, the one filled with accusation and regret, but a living silence. A silence that feels charged, like the air before lightning, like the pause before something irreversible takes shape. Nothing is finished. Nothing is decided. And yet, something has shifted. You can feel it in the way the question no longer hurts the same way, in the way the future no longer feels like a wall, but like a shadowed doorway, unlit, undefined, quietly present, in the way the past still exists, but no longer stands in front of you like a judge. It stands behind you, watching, no longer in control. This is the strange tension of renewal. It does not arrive as celebration. It arrives as presence. As a low, steady awareness that refuses to collapse back into the old story. An awareness that does not promise comfort, only honesty. That does not explain what comes next, only insists that something is already moving. You may notice it later, when you pause before dismissing an impulse. When you hesitate, then don't retreat. When you feel fear rise and keep breathing anyway. You may notice it in moments that seem insignificant, a choice you make differently, a silence you don't fill, a step you take without announcing it to anyone, or you may not notice it at all, because the deepest shifts rarely ask to be witnessed. They simply alter the field, and the field around you is no longer the same. Time feels less solid. The old urgency feels less convincing. The word late feels thinner, like a shadow that no longer knows where to stand. And yet, there is no triumph here, no resolution, no ending, because endings belong to stories, and you are no longer living inside one. You are inside a moment that does not tell you who to be, a moment that does not explain what it will become, a moment that only asks one thing, again and again, without force, without threat. Are you here? Not tomorrow, not soon, now. And if you are, if even a part of you remains present with this tension, this mystery, this quiet fire, then something ancient and patient has already recognized you. Not as late, not as broken, not as behind, but as awake. And awakening does not resolve. It opens. So there is nothing more to say, no instruction, no comfort, no final word. Only this suspended awareness, breathing with you, waiting without urgency, alive without explanation. Your best chance was never behind you. It was never ahead of you. It has always been here, and it is still here now. What you do with that knowing is not decided yet, and that is the point. Stay.